Back by popular demand, I should say.
Good morning, everyone. Can we just celebrate ourselves this morning? Let's celebrate yourself, you're wonderful. The truth is, what we do is stressful. No doubt about that. And so for you to give all your time to do this, then you're doing something very important. And yes, sometimes you may not get the part, but always just remember to give yourself that part. And tell yourself, Oluwa Kemi, you're doing well. Alright, struggling with any disadvantage is really difficult. Financial, position of birth. Somebody shared here yesterday. She was the only child of her mom. And then aside from that, she lost what she had through fire accident. And then when she got back home, nobody was there to welcome her. And they felt she was a burden. Those are disadvantages. When those disadvantages are now stacked upon each other, it can be impossible to escape them. And that's what some of the survivors go through. And that's why I can understand when one of them mentioned, it's not just about the money. It's not just about the 1 week training. It's about removing the disadvantages. Sometimes you can't remove them by giving them money. Sometimes you remove by changing the thought pattern. Until that is changed, there is still a disadvantage. I shared my story yesterday. Before I could move out and be this person that you're seeing, I needed to change the fact that if I am permitted to be, then there is a purpose that is greater and higher. And that was one of the greatest turning points of my life. That I am not a mistake, because it's not every sexual intercourse that turns into a child. I mean, is it everyone? So if it's everyone, then we'll have, I don't know how many people that we'll have in Nigeria now. No, zillions. You understand that? So we must learn, first of all, to take away the disadvantage before we can be able to help them. But then again, this disadvantage that we're talking about, sometimes it doesn't just go away like that. I want us to do this. Everybody get out your pen and your paper. You can write on the white. The next slide. All right, we're going to go through this case study. And then I want you to identify the disadvantages that this individual has. And then we'll now talk about how to deal with the setback that might most likely emanate from this lady. In 2013, when she was 18, Adora met a woman who promised her a job as a domestic worker in Libya. Struggling with family violence, lack of money in Nigeria, eagerly agreed, but as it's so often the case, soon learned she had been tricked. After a dangerous journey through the Sahara Desert, witnessing drivers and other men beat and rape women and girls, she arrived in Libya only to find that her local contact was in fact a madam. Adora tried to protest that she had been hired to do a domestic work, but the madam responded, "This is house help." The madam locked her in a room without food for 4 days to break her spirit, to make her submissive, and to reduce her self-esteem and self-dignity, and threatened to kill her, introducing the element of fear. And when that is in place, then automatically you won't have to submit. She told Adora she had been paid off a debt of £3,611 to cover travel expenses. Let's move on. She brought men to have sex with her without condoms. After a month, she discovered she was pregnant. The madam forced her to have an abortion and also now charged her for it. The madam sold Adora to a Nigerian man in Libya, who also sold her to another man who also sexually exploited her. She extricated herself from him and moved in with a man who said he would marry her. But she said ISIS abducted them, killed her boyfriend, and only spared her life because she was pregnant. They now took her to an underground prison and forced her to marry a man who raped her. 3 years into this nightmare, she found her way to the International Organization for Immigration, which now helped her to return to Nigeria. This is not just something that was cooked up. This is a real life story. Now let's move to the next slide. Our story didn't end here. Our trauma didn't end there. While she was placed in a shelter and in an orphanage because she could not return to her abusive family, she described suffering from physical and mental health problems, and she said she felt powerless to rebuild her life and sometimes thought of killing herself. Support services to address her needs were only inadequate. Several months after she had escaped her captors in Libya, she still felt like a prisoner and struggled to see a future for herself. Her plight is not unusual. So what are the problems here? Who wants to help us? The initial disadvantage, what are they? Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. The initial disadvantages I noticed were family violence, which means she had a violent background, and poverty. Then maybe lack of adequate information.
Do we agree with him? Any other thing? Rape came in when she now left, and then she was sold off, and then you can now imagine that kind of life. Now let's look at it. If this lady comes back to Nigeria, what are those symptoms of trauma that we expect to see in her? Who wants to help? We're going somewhere. Yes, ma'am. Where's our deliverance minister? Okay. She will be aggressive. Okay. And withdrawn. Okay. Okay. Aggressive, withdrawn.
Okay, she will find it very difficult to trust anyone.
Okay.
And then trying to open up, she wants to be double sure, like trying to double check everyone because a lot of people that have come her way has really disappointed her.
Thank you. All right. Okay. It's helping us with the mind.
Most of the time, like some of the beneficiaries that were handled, some of them become quite suicidal because they become so despondent, coming into a system of uncertainty, insecurity, so much fear, stressed by past experiences. So they become quite suicidal. And if not suicidal, then they have a mental breakdown, which makes them tremble. Some of them have nervous fits, some of them have nightmares, they hallucinate.
Yeah, come on, everyone. She will find it difficult trusting people around her. Then, men becomes a target. She wouldn't get close to them because she, in her heart, believes that most men are saved.
Okay. The lady there. Thank you.
I think she may want to take it to the religious realm and see herself as cursed. Like, am I the only one in this world?
The deliverance minister. We have to organize deliverance. We have very many people for you. Okay, thank you. Yes.
I also feel she will suffer low self-esteem and be so very withdrawn. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And those are the things that we would expect to see in this lady. And many more. Because don't forget, we are individuals, and so we react differently. And then unfortunately, when she came back to Nigeria, because she was also placed in an orphanage without the sense of freedom. Don't forget yesterday we were saying it, that the security we're talking about is not just because you're in a safe place. It has to come from inside. That piece that, yes, it's all over and I can do well. And so for this lady, it started with one, the disadvantage number one, family violence. It was just written on family violence. Only God knows what she went through exactly. You know, when I was preparing, I was just thinking of a scenario where maybe you have a stepfather or a stepmother in the house who will have pushed her, bashed her, maybe with words. Sometimes it's not just about beating. Words are powerful. And that's why, as professionals, we must also be very, very mindful of the things that we say. We're going to go into communication after now. We must be mindful of our non-verbal communication cues too. It rubs off. It rubs off. They see, they look at you, they want to compare you with the life that they are coming from. And so if there's anything that looks like, they won't talk. Alright, so let's move on. And so for everything that we had talked about, those are the things that we would definitely see in this individual. And so we had talked about things that in the need to escape, we know that is a major problem. In the need to escape, in the need to be able to move out the violence and every other thing, the lack of resources, the opportunities that does not abound. I was sharing with someone yesterday when the question came up and said, they are trying to rehabilitate someone. And then the next thing is, he picks his bag again and goes back. I said, is that person traumatized? Is the person traumatized? Don't forget, trauma varies. Excuse me. Trauma varies. And because somebody goes back to a behavior repeatedly does not mean that they are not traumatized. And that is why when we started looking at the trauma-informed care, we are saying, go back to the root. There is something there that is making this individual to go back repeatedly. He's running away from something. So there might be an economic situation that most likely have traumatized this individual.
And I think that's a good point, because when it comes to domestic violence, we see women going back over and over and over, but we wouldn't say they're not traumatized. So that's a perfect example of what you're talking about.
And so you keep people repeating behaviors that you would begin to wonder, haven't they learned anything from all of this? Not because they are finding an escape. And while we're looking at this topic this morning, it's more because sometimes you see this kind of setback and challenges among the survivors. And so it makes you to wonder and to ask yourself, are we really doing anything with them? I mean, of us feel frustrated sometimes. If you feel frustrated with these girls, then undo drug patients. Your head will blow. As in, don't forget this girl's experience. She was left in a room for how many days? 4 days, without food, without water. She was broken. That she even made an attempt to escape later on is because she still had some bit of self-concept. At that point in time, her willpower had been broken. Her idea of who she is had also been broken. And so it will not be a surprise if at the end of the day, like somebody said, she starts manifesting psychiatric issues. And these are some of the challenges that we'll see. So let's move on. Okay? So, oftentimes they experience, those are the initial reactions we have mentioned them, depression, anxiety, insomnia, flashback, aches and pain, that's the physical symptoms. And then they are also not able to function. And you know, sometimes this ability not to function is something that we see in a lot of them. You give them money, and then they come back and they tell you 200,000 naira is shh. And then you ask yourself, excuse me, 200,000 naira. But you know, one thing that we also forget is the fact that the psychic has taken a dash, a big bash. And so they can't, their sense of judgment, their reasoning power, their problem-solving skill is distorted. And so they can't function adequately. And part of what we also often recommend is what we call behavior modification. That's where it starts from. If you don't modify the behavior of the individual, you can't help them. What was it that made this individual to start with? And so if you're going to change the mindset, if you're going to change the behavior, you must start somewhere. Give them 2,000 naira. Go and do something with it. Let's see what you can do. But the truth again is that we don't have time to begin to do all this programming. Time is one huge factor. You know, when you give them like 10,000 naira, just start something. Let's see what you can do with this. in 3 months, report back. And so when they report back in 3 months, you see what then you cannot add up to the money. And that's how you help them to begin to build up gradually. But if you don't do that, you now find out that they are not able to achieve and they're not able to do the things that you want them to do. And that becomes a major issue for you, even as, so they struggle with a lot of things, even when they get back. Let's move on now. All right, so again, part of the psychological issues and mental issues that you see is the PTSD, depression, anxiety, panic disorder, and quite a lot of other things. Now let's look at specifically some of this setback. I still want us to be able to talk about it, and then at least let's have contributions of some of the things that we have seen right there. You walk more with them. Now we'll talk about the cognitive. That's where we want to start from. The cognitive is the reasoning part of this individual. Like our case study. This girl was locked down. She was violated severely. She got pregnant. And then abortion was done. And then she still has to pay for the abortion. What do you think they have done to her? Somebody mentioned self-concept, self-identity. What do you think has happened to her? She has seen herself as an instrument that is worthless. She has seen herself as somebody that can be used and discarded. And so when you see that manifesting, when you have sessions with them or after they had returned, please don't be surprised because that is where it's coming from. So it's coming from the foundation that is the mentality that they are carrying about. And that's why we said the first thing to change, if you don't change that mentality, then you can't achieve success with them. And that's why oftentimes in my own interaction with some of the people I work with, I ask them, first of all, tell me who you are. How do you see yourself? That's my first assignment for them. And you know what I've also found out? That when I ask them, tell me how you see yourself, that would be the first time that some of them would actually sit down to take an inventory of who they are. If an individual is able to see and understand and tell you who they are, you have achieved success. That's what I found out. At least with PJ I've worked with, I don't know how many numbers now. We have, yes, a lot of success stories. We quite a lot of them. But where we start from is a basic understanding of yourself. And then they will tell you, oh, I am useless. I am this. I am that. If you don't change that, you can't just come and tell them, oh, you're not useless, so you are valuable, you are this, and then you end it like that. That life does not work. Ask them, why do you think you are that? Why? What's giving you that concept? What's giving you that belief? What's bringing that idea to your mind? That's the stage 2. Before you now start working on what are the changes that you're willing to see in yourself. And that is where rehabilitation starts. So first of all, identify one. Who are you? How do you see yourself? What's your perception about you? The next one is, what made you to have that judgment about yourself? They will not tell you about their experiences. How they came to that conclusion. And that's what we call reality testing. Because we must be able to understand the why before we can say, oh, this is actually true about you or not. And then you now move on to what change do you want? And so if you're able to understand the changes that they want, then they'll be able to move on. Let's move on, man. So a sense of worthlessness, there's a stigma attached, we know it. That girl, she just came back from Libya. Abi? That one, Mali, she come back from. Abi? Don't be like that, they talk. I will speak preaching today again. And you know, those labels are things that often makes them not to be able to get out. Don't forget that each time they talk on the news, television or anything about girls coming from Libya, it triggers up something within them, even despite the fact that they have undergone treatment. Because it brings back the memory of who they had been in the past, or who they are even struggling to be. And that's why we must understand why they would always have setback. And they will not blame ourselves as professionals for not doing our job effectively, or we will not blame them for also not taking all the help that we have provided. You know, sometimes you get frustrated. We have been trying to help you. I remember the story of a young man. He was a drug case. Daniel was a very handsome young boy. At the time I met him, he was 18 years old. And they brought him into the facility for drug addiction. And so one day we had him on the hot seat. There's something we call the hot seat, where they choose people randomly to sit, and then you talk about the story of your life. And Daniel told us the story of his life. It was so pathetic. It was there, he was crying. And virtually everybody there in the group session was crying with him. And he made a promise that upon my grandmother's grave, I will never use substance again. And we all, we cannot pray in the hospital. But we just believed in our hearts that at least with his heart and everything upon his grandmother's grave, that would work. 6 months down the line, they brought him back. The truth was, I didn't even recognize him again. The chubby, handsome young man that I met the first time was not there again. And I saw an haggard-looking, very dirty and tattered boy. And I was asking him, please, where are you? Where is Daniel? And he said, this is me. I said, no, this is not you. This can't be you. That was one of the most, the worst case I ever handled about when you talk about drug addiction. Daniel was in the facility for over 6 months because the parents insisted that everything that is called drug must get it out of him. We did our best. The parents called one day and said they wanted him to go and register for his his JAM, and to do the online pumping and every other thing. They gave them the permission to come and pick him up in the hospital. On their way going, 6 months down the line, he has been in the facility for 6 months, so that means he had not had contact with substance or anything. On their way going to the registration center, he opened the door and got out. And he went to the joint and he started smoking. And that was how he overdosed and he died. By the time they located him, he was dead. When we heard the news the following day, you can imagine how we felt. 6 months of intense work, of whatever it is that you can think of. And we thought we had achieved success. But the first opportunity out. And it's not that he blew it intentionally. Because when we talk about urge and cravings and every other thing like that, it's difficult to deal with. It was painful. But the truth is, we had to move on. And move on with the other ones. But we took a lesson from that. And now we'll see what and what we can do. Especially in terms of capacity building and helping them to go try yourself, come back, helps better. And that was why I was talking about behavior modification earlier on. Because you need to constantly evaluate how well are they functioning. Sometimes for quite a lot of them, because of the fact that they have this feeling of worthlessness, the motivation and the drive to push is not there. And so sometimes you see this manifest, and then you ask yourself, why is this individual not doing as much as they should do? Don't forget that the value they place on themselves, it has been diminished. All right, so the other one too, cognition, it's about guilt, the guilt feeling. Why did I do it? Why didn't I see the sign? Look at started our case study. She was going there all with the thought of being an house help. But when she got there, she got to find out that it was a madam. And that put her into a very difficult situation. And the question is, why didn't I ask more questions? Somebody said earlier on, lack of knowledge. Sometimes they don't ask so many questions, and sometimes they do, but they will tell them, no, it's okay, it's all right now. Now the thing where we they do now, the thing where we they do, now you need to they do. And so because they say that, they keep quiet, and they don't ask. But oftentimes, most of them keep asking themselves, why did I remain there? Why did I run away? Why didn't I? The why didn't I is what brings a lot of guilt for them. I had one of these girls from PG High too. A young girl went to collect choir notes from the choir master. Is not choir master? In our church. And then, when they got in, the choir master that knew what he wanted to do, knew that nobody was going to be at home, and asked the young girl to come and sit down. I was going to get the book, the song notes inside this room. Apparently, while they were coming in, he had locked the door. And that was how he forced himself on that girl. To make matter worse, the girl got pregnant. And what we needed to deal with, first of all, was the feeling of guilt. Why did I go? Why didn't I shout enough? Why didn't I fight him? And so if you're not able to also take that away, it keeps recurring in them. They keep asking themselves questions of why wasn't this done effectively? So the self-blame is something that also leads a lot of them into the depressive feeling. Because they blame themselves, they keep blaming themselves for whatever it is that has gone wrong in their life. And if care is not taken, they see themselves as a cost. Taking it to the spiritual. And so even when you are saying you want to provide psychological help, it will not work. Because in their head, they are seeing themselves as a cost. They have seen themselves as being responsible. And so for some of them, because they see themselves as being responsible, they want to take that blame and say, let me suffer for the rest of my life. Now tell me, how do you want to help such an individual? You said? What did you say? That's what we rely on eventually. No, that's the truth. Let me listen here. Sometimes I pray. I may not pray with them. But just ask for wisdom and grace to be able to deal with them. I have some of our clients who calls me regularly now. Dr. Kemi, I just want to check up on you. How are you doing? Me that should be checking up on them, checking up on you now. But we did get there in one day. You understand that? So for some of them, because they have internalized the blame, and because they see themselves as being responsible, what they do is they feel, let me suffer the pain for the rest of my life. And so for those individuals, the setback will always give them 1 million there. Give them 1,000 and trillion. It won't yield anything. Those are some of the challenges. Let's move on. Helplessness. The girl in our case study, would she have been able to leave? Naturally. No. Because it was with a tight hand. And so she felt helpless. I remember when she said she came back to Nigeria again, she said when they put her in the orphanage, she felt what again? Helpless. And that feeling is a very terrible feeling. A feeling of not having a choice, not being able to do anything about your situation. It leaves you desperate. And that's why a lot of them have depression and then again begin to have suicidal thoughts because they're not seeing a way out. And so you're like there, you want to push through, you can't push through, and you're not seeing any alternative. That's a very difficult place to be. So this is some of the setback. So imagine if you give money to them, 200,000, you help them this year. Next year, they come back, you give them 100,000. And then they were not able to do anything with it. And then you give them another 300,000 the following year, making 3 years in a row, and they are not able to do anything. Tell me, what do you think will begin to happen with them? In their mind, nothing for me. You know when Lagbaja sang, don't want anything for you. What did he say? So for them, like, there's nothing for them again. So they feel helpless, they feel hopeless, they feel dejected. And that's when depression sets in. And so when you are seeing and talking with them, please take note of this. Because those are some of the things, those are some setbacks that they would have. How to deal with it? Let them talk to you. Let them reach out. You challenge the sense of helplessness and isolation that they have. Volunteer your time. That's another important thing. With all that we had said, let them also learn. So we mentioned it this morning about people who had been helped. Use peer-to-peer mentoring. That also helps. Let them be there, let them volunteer. It increases the sense of purpose that they have as an individual. It reduces the level of worthlessness that they think they are carrying about. Even if they are not doing well, let them come and share the story of how they are not doing it well. I remember the first time I came to Benin, we had a training for some of the survivors. And then there is this girl that is always just, I said, come and share your story with the survivor. She came, but when she now got, I said, I can't say it. I said, you will say this thing today. But it emboldened her. And it gave her the courage to say, okay, fine, if I can do this here, I can just talk about it. One of the things that kills our survivor over time is because they can't open up and tell people what they had gone through. I know it's not easy. But give them time, encourage them to open up. The more they talk about it, the better they're able to confront their fears and those worthless feelings, and then they're able to deal with it. And then group session is also something. All right, so we'll talk about the psychological. The Stockholm Syndrome is something, or we call it the trauma bond, is something that we see. We mentioned it earlier, when a woman will keep going back to the abusers. I was involved in a case some time ago. The father sexually violated 2 of his children and was always beating the mother. As in, not to beat, beat to stupor. And then it was be the one that will still take her to the hospital. Black and blue. When there's this people in the ministry now, DSS, and what do they call them? Domestic violence something in Lagos. They now came and wanted to arrest the man. Do you know who was shouting the most and crying the most? It was the woman. It was all, my life was scattered. Your life was scattered since you don't know. Excuse me. I tell people the first day a man raises his hand and slaps you, that marriage has been scattered. The woman started crying. I was like, excuse me? This man sexually assaulted, violated 2 of your children, beats you, and you're still crying. But don't forget that where we started from, cognition, helplessness, worthlessness, there are feelings that these people carry about. And oftentimes, it makes them to develop a sense of loyalty to their abusers. And so because I see myself as worthless, and there is no solution or no alternative, then I better remain with this person. And so it's also something that we must look out for when we are having interventions, we are counseling, or working with them. It's a setback, it's a challenge that can happen with them. Somebody shared something with me yesterday here. There's this girl in one of the shelters, and She's been there for a while. Apparently, they even called me to talk with her and then to. So I just spoke, but apparently we now met here. I was like, oh, your voice sounded like the person I spoke with on the phone, said she was the one. And then I was asking about the girl. And you know what she said was the fact that the first day they gave this girl a phone to store numbers of people that she knows. Ask me who the first person she stored was. Her abuser. The first number she stored was that of her abuser. Your trauma bond. It's real. And you must understand it to be able to deal with it. You must understand it to be able to help the individual to overcome it. They're not doing it intentionally. They're not doing it because they just want to spite you. No, it's not about you. How many minutes do I have now? Okay, that's how I should keep going. Okay. So it's not about you as the professional, no. But it's because there is a change in functioning of the brain. Trauma brings out a lot of things in people. We talked about numbing yesterday, we talked about people being frozen. It also brings out what we call trauma bond here. Okay, let's move on. So, I've had to counsel women who had been involved in domestic violence, and oftentimes they come in and they cry more than when they were even there. They will tell you all their stories, and you will feel pained. You will begin to ask yourself in your mind, that why did they now stay for this number of times, for these years? Why did they stay? Or even when they now leave, oh, well, where will I start? Where will I start? I had a client like that who, she came in. It was a friend that forcefully brought her to me. It was even the same friend that paid for the therapeutic services. And we got talking, and she shared her experiences of days that the man would throw her out or lock her outside. She would have to sleep in the car or stay outside. Or days she would have to trek when the man collect the car key. And apparently now the man even threw her load downstairs. They live in a duplex. And so she stays in one of the corner rooms there with all her things jammed in her room. And we now talked about, okay, what are the options? That's why I said it's not good when somebody doesn't see an alternative. What are the options? What are the things that you feel you can do? And that's important when you're planning rehabilitation. Because when they don't see it, you can't push them into it. So if you draw a plan, it's your plan, not their plan. Because they are not seeing a way out. That's why it must come from them. And I asked this woman, what are we going to do? And this woman now had a longer list of reasons why she cannot leave. I'm not joking. The reasons why she cannot leave was longer. And I was asking myself, is this woman okay? We had to do personality assessments and every other thing. She was okay, but do you know the truth is this? She's still there. Don't ask me how they are faring, no. Because I had to terminate at the end of the day. I can't be wasting my time and saliva. So how do we fix a trauma bond? You must be ready to help them to, one, make a commitment to live in reality. It's important that you help them to understand what reality is all about. That living with the abusers, staying there, does not connote the fact that that is the real thing. That is not the real world. And so you must help them to see what reality is all about. You do role play of what relationship should be. So you could get a colleague in the office to act out how people should talk, how people should relate with one another. You could give them a video clips on what and what and what it's expected in people to live normally. Show them how people who don't have values for themselves look like. Show them people who have values for themselves also look like. Let them be able to make comparison. That helps to bring them into the real world. They're able to see it and then they're able to make a decision. And then they must live in real time. What had gone on, what you're doing now, or that feeling is not real. It's psychological. And so they must be able to deal with it and break it. And then make one decision at a time and one day at a time. And that's one important thing I tell each of my clients. It's one day at a time. Don't ask them to make a 5-year plan and keep pushing towards it. Excuse me, it won't work. This individual is just getting up. And that's why the 200,000 naira will not work, because you're asking them to do a 1-year plan. Excuse me, they're not even seeing tomorrow. Do you understand that? And if you're not seeing tomorrow, how do you want to live till next year? Do you understand what we're saying? Hello? One day at a time. What? If you get to tomorrow, please just tick it off. And then tomorrow becomes your today again. And then what plan do you think you can achieve? What can you work out? What can you make deal with yourself? So that helps them to be able to focus. And then also to take care of themselves and start feeling their emotions. See, it's okay for them to feel hungry, to feel overwhelmed. Please tell them, encourage it. I don't let them get hungry. I tell them, anytime you get angry, you want to pour out, come, call me, or flash me, pour it out on me. Because it's also giving vent to the inner man to talk. Do you understand that? And so when they are able to communicate, feel, it breaks the bond for them. Because that way you know they are healing. They should learn to grieve and understand the hooks. What is the attachment? If you don't disconnect, you can't break the bond. Excuse me? Is it the money that the man is giving them? You know, a girl that is coming from a very poor family, please don't forget that there are people that are poor. You know how I knew? During the NSAS protest, people were stealing toilet seats, mattresses. I said, in this country, is it that they don't have toilet seats? They went to the psychiatric hospital, carrying patients' bed. Yeah, my life in Nigeria. That was when I knew that. Hey, Peter, people are poor. People are poor. So when people start telling you their story, don't minimize it and tell them, is it that bad? It's bad. In certain quarters, it is very, very bad. They have not eaten since 2 days ago, and they don't even know what they're going to eat today. You now say it's not bad because you have eaten, and you ate what you want. I tell my children, say, no, they don't want to get him. Excuse me, they got him, mom. Some people are under the bridge. They don't even have a mommy to cry to. What kind of nonsense is that? I'm giving you something you say you don't want. Keep your mouth shut, go and drink water. We allow them to enjoy themselves. No doubt about that. But please don't make it an habit for them. It's like, I don't want. It comes to a point in time, and you'll be able to control that. Alright, so another one is flashback, nightmare, intrusive memories, and other things like that. I was sexually violated when I was 13 years. 13. I shared my story when I was, I think, 36 thereabout. Please do the math. The first time I ever spoke about it, I was how old? But I will tell you that in those 23 years, I was having flashbacks and memories that were even so bad. It got back to the point that one day I now sat down and I asked myself, of all my father's children, I am the only one that does not have a name that starts with T. Then you say, excuse me, is it your problem? It's my problem. That is what we say, oh, can you see? For you, it does not matter. But excuse me, it mattered to me at that point in time. And I sat down, I saw my name was Kemi. My younger brother has a name, Femi Tope. The third one, Titi Layo. Another one had Tom Mason. The last one had Toby Loba. Titi. What is my own problem? I don't have a name that is here to T. And now started thinking back again that it's because they had me out of wedlock and they didn't like me. And I said, it's because they did not like me at all. That's why they did not give me a name that has started with T. And I started battle that morning. I'm not playing, serious battle in the house. I was making beans cake for the family to take papa and akara. I was blending the akara and the beans. And that those thoughts, intrusive thoughts, was going on in my mind. Excuse me, ma'am. By the time I got midway into Friday, my mom now came and said, it was a Sunday morning. Hurry up so that we would not be late for church service. Excuse me, is there anything bad in what she had just said? Hey, come and see fleering. I fleared up to heaven. And I started. You people hate me in this house. You are wicked. My mom was looking like, excuse me, we prayed this morning now. Everybody was happy. What exactly is the problem? I scattered the house that day. It was like I got mad. I got mad. Intrusive thoughts. It could come any time. My dad now said, calm down. Is that the problem? You know why we named you Oluwakim? That was why I knew why they named me Oluwakim. That is because mercy found him as a child that was not even entitled to anything. He became a doctor, got married, and had a child. That was why he gave me the name. It's not even just a name for me. It was a name for him that God cares for me. And now sat down. Calm down. And now calm down that day. But do you know the truth is, I still gave myself Toluwanimi that day. I said, no, me too, I have a name that's happened to you. So if anybody is mentioning their name, I will mention them. I am giving you my own examples so that you would understand that these things we are talking about is not just abstract, they are real. So when you have intrusive thought, you must be able to understand where they are coming from. They are deep-seated pain that most times they have masked. And so sometimes it comes out. It will not come out. Don't forget the drawing of the conscious and subconscious we did yesterday. It's been pushed to the subconscious. So sometimes it will come out in the conscious. You will see, like, Akint, we have gone past this now. He said, no, until we have not gone past anything. You're like, It's not that Nkechi is bad. It's because of flashback, intrusive thought, issues that have not been dealt with, that have been repressed. All right, let's move on now. Okay, emotional regulation is still part of anger, issues, and other things. It's still psychological. Okay? It's still psychological. Oftentimes, they're not able to regulate their emotion. Look at how I said I flared up. On top, let's get ready so that we will not be late for church. But because something is going on, it brought out an emotion. And because they are not able to deal with it, they have feelings of shame, worthlessness, and other things like that. So for quite a lot of them, they can flare up at any time. Sometimes you expect them to be able to handle a situation well. And then the next thing is, they just go, and you wonder, why is this coming on? It's because of this issue of memories and other things like that that we are talking about. So that would oftentimes make them not to be able to function as much as they should, and then it could create lots of issues in their mind. So emotional regulation is something that a lot of them will not be able to do well. And you know, the thing about emotional regulation is the fact that perception is important. Perception leads to interpretation. and then the interpretation will now lead to behavior. And so this is what we are saying. All right, what's written here? 3. Okay, so if you turn it this way, what is it going to? All right, so if we turn like this, and then we turn like this, what word? 4 different perception. Excuse me, if I keep insisting, you are standing here, what you're going to see is going to be different from what she is going to see. And if anybody is looking from below, what they will see is quite different from what the person looking above is going to see. If you keep insisting that is a 3, and the person you are working with keep insisting that it's a W, you know there's going to be a problem. And so oftentimes too, it's applicable to them that way too. You could ask them to move away from what they are thinking. That was what my dad used. I felt it was because I was not good enough. That was why they didn't give me a name that has a T. He now had to pull me from where I am standing to look at it from another perception. And so when I was able to look at it, the interpretation I now have became different. So perception leads to interpretation, and then that interpretation will now inform their behavior. And that is what is going to determine whether they can regulate their emotion or not. And so, when you have issues that have psychological issues, emotional regulation, flashback, and intrusive thought, what you can do, first of all, is to be able to identify the triggers and manage it well. Help them to identify what brings on this trigger. What makes you feel this way? When do you feel this way? You understand that? Then I had very bad mood. Yeah. How many people know what mood swing is? You know this dangrofa that people do? That was the way my mood was. I can be happy now. The next minute, I am down. And I cannot even explain. I can't explain why. And that's the way it is for a lot of them too. They may not be able to explain why. Alright, so look at triggers. And then another important thing that you can't teach them is a deep breathing exercise. Let's quickly do it here. My time is almost up. Okay, the deep breathing exercise is something that you can do for yourself, especially when you are even stressed. You've heard very terrible stories that, can break the heart. Just take yourself there. Alright, we're going to sit up. Your back on the backrest. Okay, so for you to know that you're actually doing, Pastor please come and help me with the mic. Okay, put one hand on your chest here, and the other hand on your abdomen. Okay, you know when you're breathing into a balloon, what do? You put air inside it, right? All right, so take air in. That means your abdomen must expand, right? That is how you know you're taking air in correctly. Sometimes when people are panicking, then they keep getting agitated because they're not doing it the correct way. Okay, so when you're taking air in, your abdomen must protrude outside, okay? And then your chest goes inwards a bit. And so when you release the air, can you see what happens to the abdomen? It goes inside, the chest shoots out a bit. That's how you do the deep breathing exercise. That's the start. And then when you're doing that, you don't focus on anything. You teach them not to allow any thought. What they should focus on more is on their breathing pattern. So just tell them it takes time, it takes control. It takes repeated practice for them to be together. And so the most important thing is start teaching them when they don't even have any issue. So by the time there is a problem, they can better handle things. All right, so let's take it in and out. Release here. All right, so you can let's take it in here. Your abdomen coming out. Count 1 to 7 in your mind. Release the hair. As many times as possible, Encourage them to do that until they feel calm. Oxygen allows us to feel calm and to be in better control. That way we're better able to function. Let's move on. All right, another one is the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That is one of the major complications that oftentimes people report with. When they come back from wherever they are bringing them in, sometimes the major ones you see is the flashback, the nightmare, and things like that. It takes a while for PTSD to develop. So if you're able to help them manage it very well, at the initial point when they come back into the country, they may not progress into PTSD. But if they repress, attention is not given, psychological work is not done, then it progresses into PTSD, anxiety. And when we're talking about severe anxiety, you will see panicking. It's like their chest wants to come out. They will tell you, I had a patient who ran from her house to the hospital because she felt her heart wanted to come out. Can you imagine running from your house? But at that point in time, it was surreal. It was like her heart wanted to pump out. So she started running to the hospital. And when she got there, she said, my heart wants to come out. So why will you start running when your heart wants to come out? It's like your heart will not come out on the way. Eventually you will die. But it's severe for them. It's real. They're going through something very, very real. And that worries them a lot. And so we must encourage them, one, to do normal things with their loved ones. And then as care providers too, let's also encourage them to sometimes just not concentrate on the things that have happened with them, but then to also focus on how well they can function and how well they can move on. Let them take the lead. We had spoken so well about this. It is not your story. Like somebody said, when I said T, you understand? It is not your story. You understand? You didn't go through the experience. You didn't walk the walk. You understand? So you can't understand how they feel. Let them, how do you want us to do this? Let them lead, and then you as the care provider must also learn to manage your stress. I am harassed. I have spoken with. Don't come and compound their problem. If you cannot attend to them at that time, just tell them, can you give me 15 minutes? Then I'll get back to you. You go and calm down somewhere, and you now come back. How many of us know that boy? Let me calm down now. Calm down like this. Okay. And so we must also be patient. Recovery takes time. There will be relapses. Don't forget that. It's like falling off the wagon. It is normal. They fall off, they come back, encourage them to climb again. But I tell my clients is, even when you do something stupid, tell me. So when you tell me, we won't be able to walk through it together. That's your role. You're not the judge. You're not the priest here. You are there to hold their hands and then you walk the walk together. And also educate yourself about PTSD and some of the things that happen. And that's the way you can help deal with PTSD, right? Let's move on. All right, so we'll talk about behavioral, and I think that's about the last part. I'm just going to run through the slide. Oftentimes, you find because of the emotional pressure, people self-motivate. How many of us have seen people who have cut themselves? They cut. You see them all the time, they are wearing long sleeve. You think that is their own form of fashion. No. Turtleneck. Check. Not like my own, no. Okay? Check. Oftentimes, they cut. When they cut, they feel relieved. Because they feel that's just the only way of dealing with the pressure. A lot of times, they over compulsive behaviors. They eat anything. They keep eating because they want to deal with the pain and the pressure. Oftentimes, too, you find out that they have impulsive, risky behaviors. I had a client who once was having sex with 10 men in a day. You can imagine having sex with 10 men. And because she wants to keep up with that pattern, she also indulges in substance. So she will take tramadol and everything that will keep her energized. So by the end of the day, she makes like 400 to 500,000. And then she wants that life. She wants to maintain that life. At the end of the day, we asked her, what did you do with that money? She was buying jewelries and every other thing. Let's move on, please. Okay, so self-harm, I've spoken about that. Oftentimes because of the feeling of worthlessness, because they see themselves as damaged, because they see themselves as not being able to function, they cut. And when it becomes overwhelming, when the feeling becomes overwhelming, that's when you see them cutting themselves to be able to let out the pain. That's their own way of dealing with it. And so you as a professional need to be able to help them to understand how to deal with it. I've spoken about substance to find relief. A lot of them indulge in substance. Especially when, during the EndSARS protest, I made a mistake of watching DJ Switch live transmission. I didn't sleep for 2 days. The memories were just... I sat down in my room and I was crying because I could not just even phantom what was going on. Now imagine them in that scenario for years. Sometimes the memories are too just black to deal with. And it's there, they want to just find something to push it away. And so they use substance to soothe themselves, to calm themselves, to do a lot of things. Because for them, that's just the only way to deal with it. So you will see some of this happening with the girl. And so that means what you're dealing with is not just one problem again. It's multiple, because you still have to start looking at addiction and other things like that. And so you must be prepared to be able to understand how to deal with them and help them. All right, so we said help them learn, not to block what has happened. Let them relive the experience. Let them talk to you about it. When they talk, it becomes real. They're able to understand the reality of it. Let them talk about it. And then when they talk about it, you help them to be able to get the needed support. Sometimes you cannot give the support, refer. Excuse me, we cannot do it all. There are some that are bigger than what you can handle. And when there is something like that, just make referrals as appropriately. Let them also do something that will give them a sense of purpose, and then they should also monitor their emotion. This is also very important. Especially if they're going to get mastery over their functioning. They can get an emotion diary. Okay? And so understand when they feel happy, when they feel low, when they have triggers, what are the things that brings on the trigger, what time of the day, is it monthly? You understand? That helps them to be able to function. And so we're saying generally as professional, you must be an exception. You know they have had trust issue. You mentioned it earlier. And so if you also, somebody shared that experience yesterday. I said the guy that was taking them to do something was also calling a number. Excuse me, she can never trust anybody in that agency again. That's the truth. It's going to take grace for her to see somebody. I said, let me talk. Because who does she know that this other person also works for? And we know ourselves in this country. We don't know ourselves. We know the things we do. So we must be an exception. An exception in terms of they must be able to open up to you. You must be patient. You must be able to listen. You must be reliable. You must be seen as different from every other person or the people that they have had relationship with. And that's what will make them to be able to trust you. Next slide. Then balance boundaries with support. Yes. Sometimes it's difficult watching the people you have struggled with going back and back and back and back. But the truth is that you must be there to help them through so that they don't fall off all the time. And even when they fall off, they know that you're there, ready to receive them, willing again. I remember the story of a young man who we worked with. And after one day, he went to the seminary trying to become a pastor. And he was going to preach to evangelism. And on the way to do evangelism, he saw a joint where they were smoking. And as he saw the joint, it triggered up a memory. Don't forget, triggers. Triggered up a memory. And he did everything he could. And he went away that day. But when he got home, whoosh, memories. He kept walking. He kept walking. He kept walking with him. It was already 2 years. In the 3 years in the seminary, he went back that night. He got into the joint and he promised himself just one stick. But the truth is, it was after 1 week that they were able to get him out of that place. And that was like years wasted because he had to begin again. Don't be afraid to begin again with them. Okay? Let's tell them it's okay to start again. And then they will be able to go on. Thank you for having me once again.